So the Iron Hands often say that the flesh is weak. Well, believe me, in this formation, the flesh is strong. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where we're always looking for new ways to get the best out of our miniatures on the tabletop. I've been enjoying playing around with some of the new options from the Master of the Chapter from Faith and Fury, so today we're going to talk about a really quite strong combo that could potentially form the core of an army list. The chapter in question today is Iron Hands, and we're going to make a ridiculously durable infantry gun line that's going to move forward and absolutely dominate the centre of the table. Iron Hands aren't typically known for their infantry, but with the new Faith and Fury options and Iron Father Feirros providing a 5-up invul to infantry, I think that there's a really strong build that's emerged. So without further ado, let's take a look. So this tactic's going to revolve around 3 very big units of aggressors, and they're going to be backed up by Iron Father Feirros himself, a cheap apothecary, and a Space Marine captain that we'll be using as a chapter master. Then loitering behind them we're going to have a couple of dreadnoughts, a Mortis dreadnought and a Contemptor Mortis dreadnought, both of them packing 2 sets of twin las cannons. So this is an expensive little core of an army. It clocks in at 1238 points, depending on exactly what upgrades you give the characters. But it'd be an absolute nightmare for your opponent to shift. Has a ludicrous amount of anti-infantry and very decent anti-tank shooting, and is incredibly strong in melee too. It seems to have most bases covered. You could of course supplement this with backfilled troops to score objectives, some ignores line of sight shooting, and maybe some planes zipping about. I do like the Stormhawk interceptors with Iron Hands. But let's talk about the castle first. So we've got 3 characters. The first and the most important is the Chief Apothecary. He's going to buy in with Hero of the Chapter, the Father of the Future warlord trait. That usually gives a 6-up feel no pain. In an Iron Hands army, however, it gives your unit a 5-up feel no pain, which is significantly better than 6-up. This is most powerful on multi-wound models, so that's one of the reasons that we're using aggressors. It should be very easy to keep all of the units within his aura range, as they're all quite big units, and you only need 1 model to be within for the unit to be within. He also, as a Chief Apothecary, has a 3 out of 4 chance of bringing a model back for the dead if he's required to do so. So even once you've put the aggressors down, they might well just get back up again, or at least get patched up to full health with his healing abilities. He'll also give this 5-up feel no pain to himself, which makes him a lot more durable against snipers. Next we have Iron Father Feirros himself. The main reason he's here is to give all the infantry squads nearby a 5+ invul save. This is probably best used on aggressors, because the enemy will typically be wanting to shoot high strength, high AP weapons at them, and it means that they will always get at least a 5+ save, and then that very nice 5-up feel no pain. With toughness 5 as well, these things will be an absolute nightmare to put down. Neither anti-tank weapons nor anti-infantry weapons will be all that efficient. Your opponent is just going to have to invest lots of quality volume fire if he wants to remove the aggressors. He's also here for his healing abilities. He will be stacking wounds back on the Contemptor Mortis dreadnought at 3 wounds a turn, and to be handing out his +1 to hit signum array on the unit that most needs it. Admittedly, we do have a chapter master standing nearby, so it's not the most relevant in the world, but the signum array could particularly be used on the las cannon dreadnoughts at the back, if they really need to try and take out something with minus to hit modifiers, such as a pesky Eldar flyer. So we're making use of all 3 of his buffs, and he's also a decent melee beatstick if the gun line is engaged in melee. Finally, as we mentioned, we have the chapter master. He's going to be running on a bike with a Storm Bolter and a Power Fist, meaning he'll be pumping out an additional 8 very accurate bolter shots a turn, and he's a very scary melee threat as well. He'll be putting his Ironstone buff on the Contemptor Mortis dreadnought, meaning that with -1 damage, the 6-up feel no pain, and its 5+ invul, it's going to be really hard to remove. His Chapter Master buff is there to massively increase the aggressor's firepower. Each one of these aggressors can put out around about 9 or 10 shots every single turn, even if they've advanced. So even if they don't get to double shoot at all, they'll on average be putting out 180 shots, with an average threat range of 26 inches after you've factored in their movement. The 4 rerolls aura is also amazing in melee for the aggressors, as they hit on 4s with their power fists, and boy do they have a lot of power fist attacks. His Chapter Master rerolls will give them basically an extra plus 50% damage. Each squad has a mighty 25 power fist attacks on the charge, and with the Chapter Master buff, a full squad on the charge will put about 15 wounds on an Imperial Knight, so hopefully enough to kill it if we weakened it a bit, with our many las cannons first. So let's talk about those aggressors then. I've chosen aggressors because as multi-wound infantry, with very good melee and very good anti-infantry fire, and only a 3-up armor save, they seem the perfect units to benefit from both Feirros' 5-up invul and the Chief Apothecary's 5-up Feel No Pain. They're durable enough against heavy firepower and light firepower for me not to worry about just throwing them up the board in the centre. That crazy amount of bolt fire will decimate hordes, and if the enemy leaves anything within charge range, then the aggressors pack an enormous punch, as we've just mentioned, particularly when combined with that Chapter Master buff. They're really a unit that's going to make the opponents want to absolutely stay the frick away from them, and hopefully give up the entire centre of the board to your Iron Hands control for all those nice objectives. They're not even that slow either. With this build we'd be hoping to advance them every single turn, so on average each squad should be moving around about 8 or 9 inches a turn. We'd have to be careful with this to make sure that we kept in all of the various aura buffs, but I think it would be easily doable. We'll have 2 squads, one on each flank, and 1 squad in the centre, or in front of the characters, leaving enough room for the Dreadnoughts to be very close to the characters just behind them. It's certainly not impossible that we might have some horde units running straight towards us, in which case the aggressors could certainly strongly consider just standing still and double firing, with each aggressor putting out around about 19 shots a turn. A full unit will do 120 shots, so that's round about 105 hits with those Chapter Master rerolls. There are not many infantry units in the game that would stand up to this. I think it's quite powerful having all 3 of these squads, because it means even if the enemy manages to kill 1 squad of them in their turn, then you still have an enormous amount of aggressors to counter-attack whichever unit took them out. Now we come on to the Dreadnoughts at the back. We've dipped into Forge World a bit for these guys, but it could certainly work with some codex options as well. You could perhaps swap out the Contemptor Mortis for a Redemptor if you can find some anti-tank elsewhere, or perhaps swap out the Mortis for a Vendread with 2 las cannons and a missile launcher. Let's talk about the Mortis first. He'll be spending the 1 command point to make him a character, so he won't be targetable, except with sniper weapons unless he's the closest model. With so many tough aggressors in the way, it's going to be a long time before your opponent is able to target him, and he can just plink away with those las cannons pretty much all game long hopefully. He'll be within the full rerolls aura of the Chapter Master, and can potentially access the repairs and Signum array of Feirros if there's a turn when he needs them more than the Contemptor Mortis does. Speaking of which, the Contemptor Mortis is a very decently survivable Dreadnought. Your opponent will be able to target him with anti-tank weapons, as he can't be a character if the Mortis Dreadnought is, and he has more than 9 wounds. But he will be an absolute pain to remove, because he's got that Iron Stone to give him -1 damage, and I would strongly consider using Duty Eternal on him whenever he gets hit by too much anti-tank firepower, meaning that any damage 3 weapons will become damage 1, and damage 5 and 6 weapons will become damage 2. Then he can just heal straight back up with Feirros, so hopefully again he should be 4 ridiculously accurate las cannons that can happily sit back and obliterate enemy vehicles all game long. I think that this could actually be an army where Iron Hands could potentially move away from their heavy doctrine to use the tactical doctrine if they were facing a horde of infantry, as having AP -1 on 180 aggressor shots is quite a sweet buff, but there's certainly nothing wrong with staying in Devastator doctrine and making the most out of that, particularly for your other units in the backfield. I mainly wanted to talk about the core of this list, but to make it rounded off a bit more, I'd probably go for something along the lines of 2 Stormhawk Interceptors with las talons and heavy bolters, 1 Thunderfire cannon, and then 3 units of Intercessors with Stalker bolt rifles to camp on home objectives. This would help us reach all of the threats that the aggressor battle line can't reach, particularly anything that's hiding out of line of sight in the enemy's deployment zone. Plus it will give us some decent durable OBSEC units to capture objectives with. Now this list definitely does have some weaknesses, particularly anything that could bring an enormous amount of sniper fire could remove our very important buffing characters, and it could make us have to think about how we play the game quite carefully. Something like 3 squads of Raven Guard Eliminators could really ruin our day here. We'd particularly have to try and think about hiding the Primaris Apothecary out of line of sight, and if you can manage that, hopefully his 5-up Feel No Pain could keep him safe from any ignores line of sight snipers. My other main concern would be anything that can outrange the aggressor squads, as 1/3 of the list is tied up in aggressors. As I said, they do have reasonably decent movement when they advance each turn, but for the first turn or 2 your opponent could certainly get his units out of range of them, though this does have the advantage that he'd be giving up the centre of the board to do so, and you can score any objectives that happen to be there. Other variations of this little build could include throwing a lieutenant in there to give all of those units an extra reroll 1 to wound. It's certainly powerful and really amps up the damage. It's just a case of whether or not we're over-investing in the amount of buffing units compared with the amount of damage dealing units. I could certainly see something like this being run with intercessors, maybe the Stalker Bolt intercessors, or even Assault Bolter intercessors, and have some Thunder Hammers on the sergeants. They also benefit really well from both the invul save and the 5-up Feel No Pain as their multi-wound infantry. If you wanted a much slower variant, then you could try using Assault Centurions instead. They're maybe a bit tougher with their 2-up save, but that does mean that they won't be using the invul save quite as much. On the other hand, if you do manage to bring one or more of those back from the dead with the Apothecary, then you're getting quite a lot of points back all in one go. And if they do ever get close, their melee is hilariously strong, and they also have a ton of flamers that they can shoot at the opponent. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I quite like tinkering around with little builds like this, and if you've got any ideas yourself for similar themed army lists, please let me know. Thanks again for listening to another Auspex Tactics video. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, or to support me on Patreon if you're finding my content good value to you. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.